Good afternoon, everyone. It is World Environment Day tomorrow. And if there's anything the pandemic has taught us, it is that our actions are responsible for the destruction we have caused in the place we call home. The Earth's temperature has increased 1.1 degrees Celsius on average since the 1880s, but it has accelerated with industrialization, energy demand, development, all that taking precedence. In fact, the World Met Organization says there's about a 40% chance, which is high, that the annual average global temperature will reach above 1.5 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial level in one of the next 5 years. So reimagine, recreate, restore is the theme for World Environment Day. While impacts of climate change are widespread, impacting ecosystems, economic activity, devastating habitats and human life, the light at the end of the tunnel is that over time, nations and organizations have come together, as was done with the Paris Agreement, COP21, the first ever universal legally binding global climate change agreement, and taken on by individual entities to make tangible change. So net zero thus has become a buzzword, but in a good way. Companies and nations began setting goals to reach net zero emission by 2050, which means balancing emissions produced by those removed from the Earth's atmosphere. Welcome to the very first Brandix Sustainability Summit on the theme towards a net zero future, translating actions, targets to action. And why, you may ask, are we having this? Well, to give you the reasons and to give you the background of this summit, I'd like to invite the brand sustainability lead of Brandix, Nadia Buhari. Nadia.
Thank you, Savitri. Thank you to all of our panelists here today, Victoria, Sabrina, Vinura, Professor Ajit and Ratika for joining us today, and all of our participants from across the world for our inaugural Sustainability Summit. Like Savitri said, we're living in what scientists term the climate emergency. And it is in this context that this whole net zero movement has emerged. And over the recent past, we've actually seen there's been quite an exponential increase in the number of countries and organizations that are getting on board with targeting to achieve their net zero emissions over the next decades or so. And as a company, Brandix has committed and is on its way to achieving net zero carbon emissions for our manufacturing operations here in Sri Lanka by 2023. And we wanted to use that to inspire a net zero movement here in Sri Lanka and beyond. And that's exactly what this summit is all about. It's bringing together a diverse set of perspectives so that we outline what this climate emergency is, set that business case for net zero emissions, and really showcase some active case studies of how the private sector is transforming to a net zero carbon future, the journey, the strategies, the challenges that lie ahead. And we really hope that you leave this Brandix Sustainability Summit inspired to really drive forward a more sustainable future.
Thank you, Nadia. So it's the case studies that we will be exploring today will be of Brandix and EFL. And the summit provides a platform to explore these business cases which are aligned to the goals of the Paris Agreement and create a narrative for industries to move faster towards a more sustainable future. We have two sessions today. The first is establishing why industries need to journey towards net zero and how. And the second is about translating targets into action. At the end of each session, we will have a 10-minute Q&A with the panelists of that session. And do please send in your questions onto the chat and we will take as many as we can in that time. Let me introduce to you our first speaker. Professor Ajit Alves, who currently serves as the Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies of the University of Moratuwa, where he is also a senior professor in the Department of Chemical and Process Engineering. He completed his PhD at the University of Cambridge following his undergraduate studies, he has a BSc in Engineering Honours from the University of Moratuwa. Professor Ajit also has an MBA from the Postgraduate Institute of Management of the University of Srijavadanapura. He's a recipient of numerous national and international awards. He's also served as project director of the recently instituted coordinating secretary for Science, Technology and Innovation, COSTI, Sri Lanka, and is a member of several local and international professional bodies. Professor Ajit Dial.
Thank you. Ayubowan and good day. Yes, it was mentioned that we have to act urgently because we are facing a climate emergency. The situation is, do we understand this? And I think that's what I would do to set the stage for that understanding and the importance of why we have to engage in this endeavor of net zero. If I to have the slides, what we see is we have the generations, the fighting, right? Just to remind, we had the gentleman Al Gore who actually pushed us to think the inconvenient truth, right? There were many who were skeptical, but the situation was there. He came up in a very eloquent and a very different way to get this the idea into our head that these things are happening. Not that these were not aware, but then general public and organizations and everybody. And of course, today we have Greta, a school child from Sweden, who is actually showcasing the importance of us to act to ensure that her future and other children, the future of the other children, are not compromised. So because we are playing with an emerging issue, and are we acting responsibly? And this is what the challenge for individuals, organizations, nations, and we have seen the deviation. So we see these two individuals. We also see the situation. I just took the carbon dioxide concentration for the month of April, 419 ppm. Now the science has changed. The textbooks that we used about the atmospheric composition has changed. And one thing we are not very sure is whether it is 420 ppm or 450 ppm or the ppm or the concentration of carbon dioxide that's going to tip this planet towards destruction. And we just can't wait for that tipping point. We have to understand there are climate skeptics, but the issue is the science is quite clear. Broadly, it's quite clear, and we have seen the issues. We have seen the impacts that across the world. So I think it's not about arguing, it's about action. That is important. So we saw in it was like 2013 when we had this 400, the carbon dioxide concentration that was crossing to 400 ppm. So it's slowly but gradually it's rising. And this is what the Paris Convention asked us. Countries converged and decided that they have to have a legally binding instrument, get countries to contribute with reductions in their contributions to the gas emissions and move towards this target, because we have this kind of like the set goal. We cannot have this temperature rise, the worst case scenario going beyond 2 degrees Celsius rise. So it's at 1.5 degrees Celsius that we have pitched ourselves to work. So this is the decade that we are talking about sustainable development goals. So 2021 to 2030, and we know this, these developments have to take place. We have to have 50% of those reductions that we are proposing to have up to 2030. And it's at 2050 that we have to look at this net zero. Now, net zero is of course designed in multiple ways, but we have the major elements that we consider. We have shown with individuals and countries, there is this not a different understanding, but we have put ourselves as challenges, defining the scope differently. For instance, United Kingdom has identified that they are going to look at 2050 and it's net zero. And then in United States, they have said they are going to look at 2050 net zero, but they have not identified which gas that they are working, carbon dioxide plus the rest of the greenhouse gases and so on. Because we know there is not just one greenhouse gas, we have multiple greenhouse gases. So predominantly we can take off carbon dioxide and we can take off methane and we can take off nitrous oxide, to name three which are of very importance. And this challenge, now we know that predominantly we are talking about net zero in terms of carbon. Yes, that's important because we are living in a carbon economy. That's what gives us the energy. That's what gives us transportation, including food and agriculture in some way. This carbon from fossils are powering our systems, right? So it's very, very important for us to understand this change need to come. This 1 degree Celsius is the upper bound, and this net zero is 2050 is the target. But we have a 50% reduction target by 2030. Just to remind, from Sri Lankan point, we also have this Colombo Declaration recently that came up, 2019. It's about 50% nitrogen management reduction, because nitrogen, that is if you take nitrous oxide, that too is having 300 times more than the carbon dioxide, the greenhouse warming potential, the global warming potential. So it's important to understand the greenhouse effect has enabled for us to actually live in this planet, right? So we have an average temperature that we have been happy with. That is thanks to the greenhouse effect. What is not acceptable is the climate change that is coming in through the loading of this extra carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gases to the environment. That simply happens through our activities. So it's interesting to see the Colombo Declaration now pushing ahead. Not only is this carbon dioxide now, as with the Paris Convention, we're talking about singularly also the nitrous oxide, the nitrogen management. So if I go to the next one slide, what can we do? We have activities to take, and we can think about the business case, right? The options are quite clear. We need to change. If you to see the low carbon energy supply, how are we to get our energy? This is important for us to do this task because we have to. The net zero means technically every greenhouse gas molecule that you input to the system, when you input one, you take back one. So that's the net value is zero. Now that's a challenge. So we have to look at, okay, in terms of carbon dioxide, how can we do that? Low carbon energy supplies, move into solar and wind and so on. And we have biofuels, the new generation biofuels. We are lining up those technologies and we can go up for low carbon energy supplies. We have to take up low carbon solutions. Now, when we go into like putting our technology platform in our organization, we take for production, we take biomass boilers. And sustainable biomass with the biomass boiler is a low carbon solution because we know when you use biomass, we are not releasing carbon dioxide that has been sequestered millions of years ago and continuously adding to the atmosphere. So we are comfortable with that, the activity that what we have to do. We have to change ourselves. We have to change low carbon intensive activities. And it may be sometimes when you talk about your logistics, right? You may have to bring in the green logistics. You may have to serve, maybe even shortening supply chains. And we have to look at the carbon in that, and then we have to reduce or select activities of lower intensity. And maybe even down to like food, which is what we do with like Bill Gates' new theory or new understanding. Because with the agriculture, we may have to go for this non-meat or maybe synthetic meat, meat produced in factories, not with agriculture. So that is transforming agriculture. And all these ideas and technologies are today on the table. I just put one point where, I mean, if we think planet is a big thing and it's far away from us, all these things, we now have a 60,000 square meter anoxic zone identified recently in the Indian Ocean in the nitrogen scenario of this low oxygen. So we are being threatened. So the actions are needed. And on one side, I say take an organization, a multinational organization that have demonstrated by taking beyond just shareholders, that everybody, the stakeholders, and they can grow while being environmentally positive. So this has been demonstrated now over and over again by many an organization, how we can care for this planet, how we can work on these transformations, but yet to deliver on the promise to the humanity, basically, that why we are, after all, with whom are we doing business? We are doing business with us, right? Among others, among each of us. And then this planet, there is no other option. There is no planet B. So at this stage, it's not about the short-term gains, but we have to have the long-term mindset, but we need to transform. And it has been shown positively that this is possible. So we have to look at to push this curve down. And unless and until we take concrete steps, this curve will not come down. We need to work on this carbon emissions per unit of activity, selecting the activities that we work on and ensure that we stick to these kind of like the 4 principles within an organization. And it's important to bring science and innovation in if we are to do that. We can't use any more things like carbon offsetting that easily. We need to do it ourselves. That's why we are talking about science-based targets for nationally determined contributions. So I think we know what to do. Our action should not put this panel in peril. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. That was sort of a good background or a good foundation to start off the Sustainability Summit, Brandix Sustainability Summit. We move now to the area of actually the initiatives that are on ground to support the net zero journey into the future. Our first speaker is Victoria Barros, Director of Advancing Net Zero the pioneering World GBC Global Project to ensure that all buildings are net zero carbon by 2050. In this role, Victoria oversees and supports green building councils participating in the project, as well as a number of other partnerships which provide funding and support, marketing and communications, and the net zero carbon buildings commitment. Victoria has a degree in architecture and environmental design from the University of Nottingham and has co-authored the book A Whole System Approach to High Performance Green Buildings. Victoria.
Thank you, and hi everyone, and a warm welcome to this first Sustainability Summit for Brandix, and a huge thank you to Brandix for asking me to address this audience here today. So as kindly covered within the introduction, my name is Victoria Burrows, and I lead a project called Advancing Net Zero from the World Green Building Council. And the World Green Building Council is a global network of around 70 national green building councils, including, of course, the one in Sri Lanka and India and all across the world. And we are working to catalyze the building and construction sector to create sustainable buildings for everyone, everywhere. And we mean by that net zero, healthy, equitable, and resilient built environment. And the green building councils across the world are developing different tools and resources, training programs and frameworks to help their markets drive towards, as has been so kindly set out earlier, the response of the building and construction sector to this enormous challenge. Because we cannot solve this on our own, but we can make enormous steps forward to change the way that we design, build, occupy, use, and ultimately, at the end of the life of buildings, how we deconstruct buildings. And we simply have to have a radical shift and transformation in the way that we approach new design, but also the way that we operate and improve the way that existing buildings perform as well. And the reason this is important is because all of those tools and systems and frameworks, you may be familiar with some of the green building rating tools, for example. The one thing that they all have in common is that they recognize actions from the private sector beyond what is currently required as local code or regulation in that market. And so it sets the tone of what's necessary and the criteria for what needs to be achieved in these buildings in order to reduce our environmental impact. And why is that important? Well, the actions of frontrunner and leading organisations such as Brandix, who are a signatory to the World Green Building Council's net zero carbon buildings commitment, are helping to stimulate the approaches and solutions that we need at scale in order to achieve those 2050 goals that were mentioned. And that requires companies to set targets much earlier. So actually to achieve net zero operational carbon across their entire portfolio by 2030, so 20 years ahead of the target dates. This frontrunner corporate action, such as being taken by Brandix and setting really high levels of ambition, creates confidence in policymakers to develop frameworks for regulation, to set long-term goals on how regulation will change over the future to help drive some of the mainstream solutions. And then that in turn creates more confidence in corporate sectors and entities to invest in net zero solutions and strategies and to think about how they can align with a net zero future. And then that in turn creates more confidence in governments and policymakers that business and industry can deliver on these higher levels of ambition. And then they'll start introducing policy. I say start introducing policy, it's already happening. It's happening around the world. And with this year, COP26, there will be a Cities, Regions and Built Environment Day for the first time since COP21 that will put our sector under the spotlight in terms of the response of the building and construction sector to this challenge. So we're really excited to be involved in organising that and helping to showcase some of this leadership action because we desperately need more of that regulation. And we call this the ambition loop. It's a feedback loop of positive reinforcement because we simply cannot wait for regulation. We cannot wait for policymakers to bring in regulation before we act. We need to be taking action from the corporate sector to show what's possible and prove that we can take action on this net zero journey. So thank you very much. I I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your questions.
Thank you, Victoria. We have one more speaker in this session before we move to ask the panel the questions which are piling on, which shows the amount of interest there is in actually moving to a net carbon future. Rathika De Silva is our next speaker, the Executive Director of UNGC Sri Lanka and a founder member of the Board of Directors of Global Compact Network Ceylon. Previously, he was the country head, DNVGL Business Assurance Lanka. He's a qualified certified GRI senior auditor for sustainability integrated reporting. He is an alumni of the Prince of Wales Business and Sustainability Leadership University of Cambridge, UK. Prior to his move to DNVGL Sri Lanka, he served in the Executive Committee as Vice President for Sustainable Development at Holcim Sri Lanka, which is now NC Cement, and led several regional projects and global initiatives. As a pioneer in corporate sustainability in Sri Lanka, his contribution has helped businesses keep pace with global standards in environment and social governance.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations to the management of Brandix and its team on this initiative, Brandix Sustainability Summit 2021, a bold and timely initiative. I'm honored to be here today to share in the discussion on behalf of the UN Global Compact on why industries need to journey towards net zero and how. To do this in just 5 to 7 minutes, a pretty scientific topic, I choose to share a few thoughts on proposed guidelines for net zero target setting with relevance to business. Next slide, please. These thoughts I share with you today are directly from this report developed by CDP on behalf of Science-Based Target Initiatives, SBTI. The report is a collaboration between CDP and the UN Global Compact and a few others. Primary authors of this are Alberto Carrillo Pineda, and Andre Chang, and Pedro Ferreira, all representing CDP. And as you can see, it's nothing to do with me. I'm only presenting it to you, so you know where to direct your questions. Just kidding. Next slide, please. Climate change is a high priority ESG issue. Business has a key role to play in here. Companies need to transition to business models that create value to shareholders and stakeholders without causing an accumulation of GHGs in the atmosphere. My next slide, please. While these targets are often created as equivalent and assumed to have similar ambitions, in reality, there is a significant difference amongst them. They differ across 3 key dimensions. The boundary of the target, which could be the scope of the climate impacts, referring to CO2, the greenhouse gases, etc. And it can also be the scope of activities, which are referring to the operations, the value chain, or its products. The second dimension in the mitigation strategy that the company follows to attain the targets are such as reduction of emissions, negative emissions, and carbon finance. The third dimension is the time frame. Could be long-term or short-term. Next slide, please. Acknowledging the diversity that exists in net zero target setting, I'd like to share with you the proposed set of principles to guide the formulation and assessment of net zero targets in a way that it ensures that the targets are effectively driven to meet the societal, climate, and the sustainability goals. So let us have a quick look at these 3 principles. The principle 1, while the transition to net zero will be different for each individual actor, depending of course on their individual and unique circumstances, it is important that all converge towards the state that is compatible with reaching net zero emissions at a planetary level. Hence, the reason for principle 1 to ensure that corporate net zero targets lead to a state that is compatible with reaching net zero emissions at a global level. So the first guiding principle provides clarity on the destination that the global economy needs to reach and how this translates from global level to corporate level. The second principle introduced here intends to guide the transition to ensure that a state of net zero is reached in a way that is consistent with societal climate and sustainability goals and within the biophysical limits of the planet. Principle 3, it is crucial both for the success of the climate action movement and to limit business risk for companies to ensure that their business models align with net zero economy. This means that companies need to transition to business models that create value to shareholders and stakeholders without causing accumulation of GHGs in the atmosphere. Slide 6, please. Let us see how these principles help us towards corporate net zero strategies. Usually, corporate net zero strategies consist of a combination of tactics that mitigate the impact of the company on the climate and accelerate society's transition to net zero. So the multiple combination of mitigation tactics leads to different outcomes for companies, for society, for nature, and also for climate. The report illustrates 5 hypothetical mitigation strategies that mirror common approaches to today's corporate target setting landscape. In the interest of time, let us just look at one strategy. So, assessing this strategy with the 3 guiding principles stepwise. Principle 1 is it consistent with no net accumulation of GHG in the atmosphere? Yes, because no net accumulation of greenhouse gas emissions and any residual emissions are neutralized by the carbon dioxide removal activities. So the second principle, is it consistent with the attainment of Paris Agreement and SDG? Again, I would say yes, embracing a deep 1.5 centigrade decarbonization strategy would be in line with Paris Agreement and the SDGs. Lastly, is it resilient in a net zero economy? Yes, because a robust science-based net zero strategy considers the entire value chain. The company will identify the most relevant sources of emissions across the value chain, and this would encourage allocating assets, technologies that are not feasible in a low carbon economy, making it a resilient model. This is a 7-minute glimpse of what the science-based net zero target setting is for corporate sector. To give you more insightful detailed understanding on net zero target setting for corporate sector, I invite you to please refer to this link that I have asked to be placed in the chat box. And I would urge you to please go through it carefully, because we already have many companies who have signed up and who are moving towards science-based targets. And we would like more businesses to work towards it. And with that, I would like to say thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ratika. Yes, that would be the ideal situation where all companies do go into the net zero future goal. It's a long journey, like you said. The formula is different for each individual company, but the end result will not be different if it is we work towards those principles. The questions that have come in, I will start off with Professor Alves, please, because this has come in directly to him. How do we align our policymakers towards sustainability, and what are the strategies we can actually employ to align them towards that?
My view is that we do have lots of policies coming into play, right? Sri Lanka has moved on with some pioneering policies. It's just that, like in the outside, the rhetoric has not met with action. The gap is that issue. So that is where I would think that instead of governments all the time driving us toward results, we should also take an interest in how we ourselves should realize the importance of getting into this process, and then moving, with the government, forcing them to act on our behalf as well. The policies that are already there in place to be mobilized to action. We have the policies sitting on shelves, right? From a Sri Lankan point of view, I would say we are like 23 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. I'm only taking the net zero concept from a carbon perspective. That's what we do an annual emission. That is from a manufacturing base. So if you take from a consumptive base, which is if you account the trade that we are doing, we are maybe around 33 million metric tons. So it just jumps up. But again, as a global, as a nation, we are about 0.065% of the carbon dioxide emissions of the world. So interesting, if you take a per capita, it's like 1.1 metric tons per annum, right? So it's interesting. We can have this kind of a challenge. We know the value of our contribution. We can work towards this. And I would say a lot of action has to come from us, the desire to move in the direction. And policymakers mean politicians. Politicians means being more sensitive to the voice of the voter. So I suppose in Sri Lanka, we have to drive by changing ourselves a bit more aggressively and pushing the government.
Thank you, Professor. Maybe you can answer this as well. Isn't the impact of animal agriculture, which is 18% and growing, of all greenhouse gases far more than that of transport emissions? And then why is the focus always on fossil fuels?
I suppose these are now coming out. This is now coming. This has come out basically. People are aware of this situation, and United Nations have also pointed this out. But we are very much familiar with the carbon dioxide from this fossil fuel and the transportation and so on. Yes, that's true. The industry. That's where now this concept of modifying agriculture has seriously been put in place. So I suppose now that's been put on the plate for us to digest and to take action. Now we are aware of this.
Would Sri Lanka take that seriously?
From our point, I think Sri Lanka is not having this type of mass scale agriculture. All right. So we have more of a nitrogen issue with the urea and then the loss of the nitrogen and the nitrous oxide aspect, rather than purely from this the mass scale agriculture that livestock we are talking about. Sri Lanka is not in that particular equation to that extent.
Right. Victoria, question from the audience. Can you explain the emission sources taken into consideration when calculating net zero carbon operations at a facility?
Okay, yeah. So when we're talking about net zero operations, we mean the energy and the resulting carbon emissions that go into using that building. So heating, cooling, powering, lighting, and in some cases, the process loads. And so in our definition for the commitment, we focus on, because I think this may have been mentioned already, but those emissions from the use of buildings are responsible for nearly 30% of energy-related carbon emissions globally. So it's a huge slice of the pie, and that's what we're focusing on. We know some of the solutions are out there already to reduce these emissions from consumption. And so our primary focus is scope 1 and 2 related emissions. So that's emissions from energy generated on-site combustion, for example, and then the indirect emissions that are brought to the building from the electricity grid. And that's why within all of the programs and within the commitment, we focus really strongly on demand reduction. If you can do nothing else, if there's challenges for you reaching net zero, aim for net zero, but start with preventing and reducing the energy consumption. And that means, setting a science-based target. Part of that process is to understand what your consumption is right now, identify where those opportunities are for reduction, and understanding where those emissions are occurring.
Right. Rati, I will address this to Ratika, but I think Professor and Victoria may be able to add something to this. The options to achieve net zero in Sri Lanka is currently severely limited. the regulations to allow the use of RECs or offshore emission offsets are still not in place, which is the question's understanding. If you can shed some light on the available options and the processes in place to open up these regulations, that would be appreciated. Ratika, your mic is on.
Actually, I don't have a very good response to that. I'll be very honest with you, but I do understand the difficulties that are faced by many of us who are trying to make way and try to get across faster than others. There are several companies who are very keen to be the first in this direction, but there are some issues, and I have to say that it would be wrong for me to give you a comment on this without really understanding the background to it, unless Professor Ajit Alves is more aware of what is happening in that area. Sorry to.
Professor, are you able to shed some light? And then Victoria, maybe on a larger, longer, wider scale, you'll be able to give us something.
Right. On the may not be on the international and in the policy side that's coming out, but I won't say that that our options are limited. I think we have so many options that we can do. It's just that we need to align. I mean, understand what we can do. Like when you say that you are taking, let's say Brandix, for instance, if you are now having on this net zero initiative, you are taking on a mission that you are transforming your buildings. I mean, you're talking about energy transformation, buildings, the food system, and like take those major sectors, and each one understanding your carbon footprint and the need to act. And then you just bring in technology sense. And I said, maybe there's nothing, but I said these offsetting concepts, right? I do what I'm interested in doing, but I get somebody else to save on behalf of me, and both together say, no, we are now not doing anything. I think that time seems to have passed, because you see, even though we design long journeys, I think you used the word, but remember we have now this fixed time scale, right? The journey has to be, I mean, you have to finish this journey in this defined time. We need to act, right? So if, I would say Sri Lanka has a lot of opportunities. I mean, we can take the green buildings situation, and we have been pioneers in some way in showcasing to the world on how to get into maybe the largest cluster of green buildings in the apparel sector. So you have it, and it just, how do we learn from that segment and push it across to the other segments? We can do that with energy. We have the biofuels staring at us to do and this option, and yet we are not, because Sri Lanka contributes more in the transportation sector. So I think we have the options, and I don't think we should work only on a one financial instrument or green finance instrument, saying, okay, if that is getting delayed, that should not stop us.
Victoria?
Savitri,
Yeah.
I said I would hold back my comments, but to what Professor just said, yes, there is another way you can approach for corporate sector very specifically, is that you got to understand, you got to look at your entire sector, not just yourself. And as a sector, how much do you contribute? You can come together in agreement that by a certain date, by 2050, 2030, you as a sector would reduce so much. And you will create a roadmap, and thereby you will decide how each one would contribute towards that. And that might also be a way to approach it, because at the end of the day, it's not just one, but it's the accumulation of all that matters. Just comment on that. Thank you, sir.
Victoria.
Thank you. Yes, and I think that Professor Ajit is right, because I've been to Sri Lanka. I went for my honeymoon and I stayed in a net zero hotel, so I know that it's possible. And you know, the solutions and options are available. It's all about the choices that you make. From taking a broader perspective, from across the world, I've seen buildings that have been limited by the amount of renewable energy they can install on site by regulation. And then once the building was built, then the regulation had changed and they were able to install more solar. You should not be limited by what the current regulations are allowing you to build. You should be using that long-term thinking, that long-term strategy. The regulation is coming, and it's the responsibility of the private sector to go further than that, and what's required it's the minimum level. It's not the target, right? What's achieved, what's required in regulation. My message would be that if you cannot achieve net zero today, if RECs aren't available, if you can't procure renewable energy, if you can't generate renewable energy on site, that you design your buildings or you prepare your existing buildings to be net zero ready. So preparing them with roof structures that are optimized for a future solar installation, for example, or ensuring that your buildings are connected to a grid that in the future could be supplied by renewable energy, because it will happen. And the best you can do is optimize the building design for that in the future, optimize your strategy and focus on, as I mentioned earlier, the reduction of wasted energy, because that will contribute a huge amount to cost and also your emissions. So that in the future, when the regulation is in place, and it's not a question of if, it's when, then your business is prepared for that.
Right. Yeah. Ratika, last question, if you can very quickly give me an answer for this one. The conversion of high carbon sources into low carbon sources need extensive capital investment as well as high operational costs due to logistics and availability of sources like biomass, for instance. How could we be competitive in this region with such additional overheads? And could the brands compensate this by premium price for products? How will this work? How do you recommend that this goes through?
Let me answer it this way. What is the high cost? The high cost, why are we all here today? Because we are focusing on something that is considered a high cost to everybody, which is the climate, which we have compromised on for many years. Yes, it does come at a high cost, maybe because you're looking at it from in terms of return on investment. But the reality is, are you able to continue this way? Are you able to continue to do business this way? What does it do to your reputation and your brand? Because at the end of the day, the faster you get on to achieve this target, you have more time to work across all the way up to 2050. But the longer you wait, you're going to have to invest a lot more because it becomes more expensive. And the technologies keep changing. And the reality is that at the end of the day, can you afford to be left behind and then have to catch up later? And that cost needs to be considered. Apart from that, you would also have to consider what would happen in terms of the opportunity cost, that if you lose your customers because you, who are a part of a supply chain, does not meet the standards, and there are others who have raised the head, how long will it take for you to catch up, and how much will you lose during that time or until then? All of that needs to be brought in together when you are costing, without which you are not really seeing the actual cost. I hope I have answered it right, but this is my justification to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Ratika.
Thank you, Ratika. Thank you also to my session panelists. We have had a very short session and another session which we have to catch time up with. So thank you very much, Professor Alves, Victoria Burrows, joining us from London, and to Ratika De Silva. Thank you. Just stay on because there may be questions subsequently later on as well. Our second session is about translating targets into action. And we have in our first speaking segment two speakers, Nadia Buhari, who's the Brandix Sustainability Lead, and you met her right at the beginning of the summit. She's a double degree in environmental management and biotechnology. She's passionate about developing inspired solutions and supporting Brandix's efforts towards mitigating the impact of its operations on the environment. Having been one of the key proponents for Brandix net zero carbon commitment, Nadia plays a key role working together with internal and external stakeholders in driving forward Brandix's sustainability framework. As a certified project management professional, she's also led the sustainability projects for Brandix. Joining her in that session is Vinura Jayavardhana, Engineer Sustainability, who has a master's in sustainable energy systems from the University of Southampton. He works with a wide cross-section of functional teams to reinforce Brandix's overall sustainability initiatives and leads the Earth pillar for Brandix, focusing on mitigating the organization's waste footprint on the environment across its operating locations in Sri Lanka, India, and Bangladesh. Vinura was also instrumental in establishing group's partnership with UNDP for responsibly sourced fuel wood in Sri Lanka as part of its commitment towards achieving a net zero carbon future. Nadia and Vinura.
Thank you, Savitri. Let me just quickly put up the slides. So today, the session that Brandix and EFL is presenting is on how we're going to translate these targets into actions. And for me, I believe that the first step of translating any target into action is to actually have that will and commitment to set that target. And for us at Brandix, sustainability isn't something that we do because it's fashionable, or we do it for compliance reasons, or because it's a marketing stunt. For us, it's in our DNA. And this is, how we do business, by providing an inspired solution. We've heard what the panelists you said before as well. Victoria, Ratika, and the professor reiterated that, this isn't just about wanting to do anymore. It's about needing to do, and we can't ignore that responsibility that we have. And I think that as the private sector, we have a collective responsibility to ensure that we're leading that way forward, to ensure that we're leading towards a sustainable future. And that means today, a net zero carbon future. Something that we, for us, our journey in sustainability at Brandix has been a very long one. And we've realized that sustainability is not something that's a short-term fix. It's a long-term solution that has a lasting impact. And when we take our sustainability journey, which started over a decade ago, actually it was about 14 years ago in 2007. And in 2008, we actually established the world's first LEED Platinum rated apparel manufacturing facility in Sidua. And that was really what set the stage for us as we set on this journey. In 2007, what we also did was we needed to understand what we considered were the most important impacts of our operations on the environment. And we decided to do that on the 3 key pillars. So air, water, and earth. So our air pillar takes care of all of our energy and emissions, and that's the pillar that I'm really going to focus on for this presentation. But we also have the pillar of water, which takes care of our water treatment, our water consumption, and our wastewater treatment as well. And our earth, which takes care of our complete waste footprint across our operations. And what we see is that over time, all of the hard work and the commitments that we have made. So in 2007, we really set bold targets. We said we wanted to improve our carbon footprint. We wanted to reduce our water consumption. And at that point in time, because the infrastructure in Sri Lanka was as such, we wanted to make sure that all of our waste was diverted from a landfill, and that we really looked at more innovative and technological ways of using that waste. Recycling, reusing, incorporating it into a circular economy concept as well. And today at the bottom of this slide, you can really see what that impact has been for us. For our energy, we've achieved an 84% reduction in our carbon footprint per dollar of revenue. And that's massive. And our water consumption has improved by 30%, and nearly 91% of our waste is recycled and reused, and none of it is landfilled. And that's something that we're really proud of. So like I said, with the theme of this session being about net zero, I'm really going to focus on how we're getting to net zero carbon emissions. And in 2019, we wanted to set an even more ambitious target. We've come along a 14-year journey. We set our targets, we kept achieving them. And we thought, why not push the boundaries a little bit more? So in 2019, we established the world's first net zero carbon apparel manufacturing facility in Batticaloa, and that's something that Vinura will talk to you a little bit on. But how we got there took in a lot of work. And when we set that target in 2019 of achieving net zero carbon emissions for our apparel manufacturing operations in Sri Lanka, we'd already set the groundwork over that long journey. So over that 14 years, we'd invested a lot in our energy efficiency. Because like Victoria pointed out, it's about ensuring that your operations are energy efficient. And once you do that, you really ensure that whatever energy that you use comes from renewable energy sources. So for us, resource optimization was really the most important pillar and strategy under this operation. And of course, we did invest in technology. We looked at innovative methods of lighting. We went into all of our equipment, so even like sewing machinery, critical building machinery as well, like cooling systems. And we really wanted to make sure that whatever operations that we do has a lasting impact. And that has really paid off for us. Aside from all of the investments in new technology, we wanted to make sure that whatever systems and infrastructure that we have remains energy efficient over a longer period of time. And that's something that we believe is very important for us in our sustainability journey. Because if we keep changing our machinery, if we keep buying new things, we're not really being sustainable. We need to ensure that we can use this and push their life cycles even longer as much as we can. And that has really worked for us. We've improved on our design and optimized our layouts for things like our cooling systems, our compressed air systems, and that has all led to that really big decrease in our carbon footprint. And as much as it's about our energy efficiency, we know that whatever energy that we use has to come from renewable sources. As the professor mentioned, we're living in a climate emergency. We can't keep using fuels such as coal and things like that. We need to move to more sustainable sources. And these are all becoming more cost effective as we go along this journey. If you look at it on a time scale, a few years ago, renewable energy like solar PV was quite expensive. Today, it's extremely cost effective. And for us, we've seen these returns over a 3 to 4 year period, which means that it makes it the right thing to do for us. It makes business sense. And one of the most important things that we've done under our renewable energy strategy is previously all of our boilers were powered by heavy furnace oil. So first, we made that move to ensure that we switched the heavy furnace oil into biomass. And 100% of our boilers are fueled by biomass today. And we're also working on a very important partnership with UNDP to ensure that along that value chain, whatever biomass that we use comes from a sustainable and a certifiable source, so that there's end-to-end accountability across our energy sector. Aside from this, we're also leveraging off on solar. And that has been something that has really worked well for us. We have over 9 megawatts of solar PV across 12 facilities, and we keep adding on. We're putting in another 11 megawatts in Sri Lanka over the next few years. And we're looking to expand this program to our India and Bangladesh operations as well, because we see the benefit that this brings for our business. It's not just about looking good on a report or in a paper or to our customers. This is the right way to do business, and we've seen it become more cost effective for us. So like I said, all of that work has resulted in a huge impact for us. And what we know is that sometimes organizations are quite reluctant to get into that investment phase. Ratika also earlier pointed out, that we can't afford to keep thinking this is really expensive for us to do, that, this organization is not doing it, that sector is not doing it. But it's now become a collective responsibility because we can't afford to keep doing business the way we already do. Business as usual can't work anymore. And as much as we understand that there is a significant investment that's required to get to net zero carbon emissions, there has been an absolutely impressive impact for us. And as you can see here, so in 2007, when we really started our sustainability journey, we wanted to set our targets. We needed to understand where our baselines were. And so when we measured our baselines, we emitted nearly 277 grams of carbon dioxide for every dollar of revenue that our business was earning. And as we kept moving along to become more resource efficient, as we moved along to ensure that all of our boilers are powered by biomass, and we started putting solar PV on our rooftops, we've seen this decrease by over 84%. And this is really what that business case is about. While it's also about reducing our carbon footprint and ensuring that the emissions that we emit into the atmosphere, and that results in, of course, climate change, it's becoming a positive impact. So as opposed to us saying that, oh, we're, emitting this many carbon dioxide emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, which is contributing to to climate change and global warming, we're saying that we're reducing this much, and an 84% reduction is a lot. And just as our carbon footprint reduced, obviously we have to understand that as we become more energy efficient, we need to ensure that whatever energy that we use comes from renewable energy sources. And today, that percentage share of our energy consumption from renewable energy stands at 67%. And as we go along this journey over the next couple of years, that's going to be 100%. And for us, this has made absolute business sense for us. Our carbon footprint has reduced. Impact on the environment has been minimized, it has been mitigated, but it's also cost effective. As your systems, your equipment, and your facilities become more energy efficient, it means you're using less energy, and which means the cost, there's a cost saving involved for your energy consumption across your operations. And that is really where the business case for moving into net zero carbon is. And we do understand this is not an easy journey that everyone would like to get on board, but it's not something that we can ignore any longer. And as a company, we've been fortunate that we have leadership that is committed towards this as much as we are too. And once we set foot on that journey, you can reap the benefits of all that hard work and commitment, just as we have today. And there's a video that we'd like to play to show you just how much that impact has on us, our operations, and of course, all of our external stakeholders as well.
Here at Brandix, we've been delivering inspired solutions through our inspired people to the apparel industry for nearly half a century. But today, our purpose goes beyond our business, as we are equally committed to bringing sustainable solutions to our communities and the environment. In fact, we are on a mission to make all our manufacturing locations in Sri Lanka net zero carbon by 2023. This is not the first time we've endeavored to break new ground in sustainable development. Our commitment towards sustainability began in 2007. Since then, it's become a vital part of our DNA as we set out to make our vision a reality. In 2008, our green factory in Seedua became the first ever apparel manufacturing facility to be LEED Platinum certified under the US Green Building Council. In 2011, we became the first apparel manufacturer to become ISO 50001-2011 Energy Management System certified. In 2017, we set up a new factory in Batticaloa that runs entirely on solar power. In 2019, that same manufacturing facility earned us yet another world first when it achieved net zero carbon status. And we're not done yet. We've still got a lot of sustainable ground to cover. In 2019, we rolled out a 5-year sustainability strategy to enable net zero carbon operations across all our apparel manufacturing facilities in Sri Lanka, ensure zero water wastage and zero discharge of hazardous chemicals, and recycle and reuse 100% of our waste material. By 2023, we aim to keep the air, water, and earth fully protected throughout all of our processes, cementing our identity as a truly sustainable apparel manufacturer that inspires communities and industries towards a greener, healthier, more sustainable future. Brandix, leading the way in sustainability.
When we speak about net zero carbon, we usually visualize large solar panels or large wind turbines and other sources of renewable energy. We usually tend to give a very reduced emphasis on the buildings itself. Globally speaking, approximately 40% of energy-related carbon dioxide emissions come from buildings itself. And this is exactly the point that we managed to address with the construction of our facility in Batticaloa. As you're aware, our facility in Batiklo is the world's first net zero apparel manufacturing facility. It is also a LEED platinum rated facility. It is Sri Lanka's highest LEED rated facility and is also the world's second highest LEED rated building. At the point of construction, the on-site renewables within the factory was the largest of its kind. It has a capacity of 1.65 megawatts and an annual energy yield of almost 3,000 megawatt hours. This was in fact in surplus of what the factory actually needed. Complementing the renewable energy on site, we addressed the issue of energy efficiency on 4 points. The first point was better insulation. Yes, of course, the solar panels itself did provide us with sufficient insulation, but we ensured that the building material itself was of a very high solar reflectance index, which reduced the entire solar heat gain of the factory. And as you can see on your screen, we used low E glass. So for those of you who are not familiar with low E glass, E stands for emissivity, which essentially means that there is a very high percentage of light that's been utilized while keeping the unwanted heat away. The next point was innovative lighting. We've used solar tubes, we've used skylighting to light up our factory floor and also ensure that all light fittings are LED. The use of LED not only reduces our energy consumption significantly, but also prolongs the product life cycle of the light fittings itself. The next point was efficient machinery. My colleague Nadia spoke to you about the use of efficient machinery. And to give you a little bit of context, all in all, cooling takes the most amount of energy within the whole facility, amounting to over 44%. And by investing on state-of-the-art chiller and cooling technology, we were able to reduce that consumption by around 37% compared to a conventional setup. Finally, we move on to real-time monitoring. Having a building management system in-house and real-time carbon dioxide sensors, we are able to not only monitor the consumption patterns very regularly, but also ensure that the ambient conditions are of utmost conditions for occupational work and health. All in all, having achieved this, having implemented these initiatives, we were able to reduce the overall energy consumption of the factory by around 53%. For a factory build-up area of 191,000 square feet, that's indeed a remarkable achievement compared to a conventional facility. So similar to the energy or the air pillar, on the water pillar, we've ensured that there's absolutely no wastewater discharge from the facility, which gives it the tag of a zero liquid discharge plant. And on the consumption side, we've managed to achieve a 63% saving in water. On the waste aspect, all the waste generated at our facility is recycled, further reinforcing the facility's waste footprint. It is evident that a net zero carbon certified facility is indeed very energy efficient. And with the success of our facility in Batiklo, it's not only the energy efficiency that is key. It is also the perfect environment to work in, making it more comfortable, more cost-effective in operation, and of course, more sustainable. Savitri, over to you.
Thank you both, Vinura and Nadia, for taking us through all the initiatives that have been done by Brandix. We need those corporates leading the way. And here's another corporate that has set itself a goal. And to give us that information, Sabrina Yusuf, who's the Global Sustainability Lead of EFL. She has prior experience working with international NGOs throughout the Southeast Asian region over the past 4 years. She has championed EFL's ambition to be internationally recognized as a pioneer in sustainable operations and initiatives for the logistics industry. Through her various collaborations with multiple stakeholders, including airlines and shipping lines and customers around the world, she's garnered valuable insights and experiences on their requirements and agendas towards becoming net zero. One of her current mandates is preparing AFL to be the first net zero logistics company in Sri Lanka. Sabrina?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you firstly to Brandix for inviting EFL to be a part of this summit. We are deeply honored and grateful for the wonderful relationship EFL and Brandix have shared for over 2 decades. I was asked to come here and talk to you for 10 minutes about what inspired EFL to be a part of this net zero journey, what we have done and what we plan to do. As I was going through my notes, I realized everything you need to know can be found on www.efl.global. So in a logistics sense of fashion, I decided to reroute. I don't want to come here and tell you everything that you will be able to find online. I also don't want to get too technical, as that element was wonderfully captured by the expert panelists. So I thought it might be interesting if I shared with you an insight to some learnings we have had, some strategies we have used, and some challenges that you too may be facing, and what has assisted us in this journey toward embarking net zero. One thing I have personally learned at my time in EFL focusing on sustainability is that I have been to many seminars and many workshops. I've met brilliant representatives from dazzling companies, global ones and local. And we would have remarkable speakers present, and they would emphasize on the importance of sustainability, incorporating it into your business models, the impacts of climate change, the urgency for corporates to work together, and so on. And here I am in a room with people with similar designations as myself. And we are just looking at each other going, well, we know all this. I mean, that's why we are here. We are sustainability representatives and we understand the importance of our jobs. One thing I found lacking in these rooms were the CEOs of the companies being represented. They need to know the importance. They need to know the value. And we can operate the day-to-days and champion many things, but ultimately they need to drive this. I find a big gap between these two in many companies I have worked with. And very few representatives will actually go back to their offices, get in touch with their top management, and etch it in their minds the importance of this subject. And it's very sad because the approach is hire people to do the CSR, check all your boxes, but no real involvement or engagement from the top. This is one of the biggest mistakes an organization can make. It's impossible to put the responsibility on one person or on one department on this journey we call sustainability. And most importantly, if it's not funneled sincerely from the top, you will struggle to become a net zero organization. At EFL, my team and I have been very fortunate to work directly with the founder and CEO, and I am grateful to them for being fully involved in our scope of work and genuinely caring about it enough. One of our values at EFL is consciousness, conscious of people, conscious of our environment, and conscious of our processes and business. This is something the company naturally always had in its DNA, so it was a usual process to be able to do monthly meetings with my top management. Having consistent engagement and conversations has been one of the key reasons why we have been fruitful in fast-tracking this journey. I urge those in a different situation to us to find your boldness and go tell your bosses, tell your supervisors, I want to do my job, I want to meet my KPIs, but for me to do so, you need to help me. I need your support. Another challenge I know us reps face is staff buy-in. I know I personally faced this as I joined EFL. We are a logistics company stationed in 25 countries, 60 cities with around 2,400 staff. We have different cultures and people ranging from the United States to Europe to the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. And here I am, a newbie, the first official representative to be hired for sustainability. And I'm meant to convince all these people to work with me. I'll be honest, apart from some of the offices in the West, this was a new language for all our staff. And in a logistics company, everyone's priority is to make sure cargo is being moved, no disruptions, reviewing their P&Ls, etc. And fair enough, no one has time to invest in something that is new for them and that they don't visually see generating any profit, at least immediately. So how do I get all these people to understand the importance? I needed all their help, but how am I supposed to track any of our carbon emissions or our global data without their support? How am I supposed to study the processes? Initially, they just saw me as CSR. As I joined, people didn't understand what on earth I was doing here or what I was even trying to do before I even attempted to do anything. Here's where top management comes into play. The founder of our company very kindly strategized a way forward. He made a video, a personal one, to all our staff, and in his own charismatic manner talked about goodness, consciousness, giving back, humanity, planet, etc. This video can be found online now, but back then it was only for the staff. He did it in a manner that made them all feel, no matter where they were in the world, as if he was talking to them and only them. They felt inspired. They felt they wanted to do something. So we spoke to the countries and said, listen, this might cost us a little, but do what you guys want to do. Find something you are passionate about and you as a team want to be a part of, and just do it. We immediately saw enthusiasm. Kenya distributing water barrels to all sorts of rural areas, Hong Kong going and serving food at soup kitchens, Madagascar taking their own children and families and starting a reforestation project. They felt proud and happy to be a part of something that was bigger than them. We call these passion projects and we saw it beautifully unfold across our global regions. We couldn't tell them why this new journey was important, so we made them feel it. And once they did, they were willing to have more conversations with me and even get a little technical. Because let's face it, I needed their global support when it comes to collection of raw environmental data and so on, for the purpose of science-based targets and much more. But I could not find a way in on technicals. Instead, with this approach, once they felt, they were able to link the connection. Sometimes you have to pocket out a little and do something a little different to see a return in tenfold. Consecutively, we formed EFL Global Goodness, a staff-driven initiative, the umbrella where all our sustainable projects lie. And here we focus purely on impactful and sustainable projects that we directly influence in the logistics industry. Moving on, someone once told me, Sabrina, if you are the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. And then I sat and I thought about it, and they were right. I needed to be smarter, I needed to learn, and I needed to grow. I imparted this wisdom I had just learned to my team, and we threw ourselves into many groups. Taking part in memberships like Clean Cargo Working Group twice a year gave EFL the opportunity of being part of the founding members of Sustainable Air Freight Alliance. We attended workshops led by tycoons in the sustainability world. We threw ourselves into UNGC, Green Freight Asia, and many other networks so that we could learn and so that we could grow. Surrounding yourself with experts and people who speak the language of sustainability like it's their mother tongue make this journey more simple as you unconsciously start to up your game. They make you better, so throw yourselves in there. And the beauty that came out of all this is that we made valuable relationships. We made friends with our customers who were also in these working groups. As a logistics company, when we bid for business, one of the requirements by many of our top customers is an assessment of our sustainability targets and initiatives. Nobody knew who EFL was a few years ago, but by surrounding ourselves in these different worlds, they now knew us. They knew we were actively partaking and driving bigger agendas. So we got questioned a lot less. And this helped us with business too. And speaking of customers, my last point here is I cannot emphasize to you the importance of these relationships. Just before COVID hit, I took a flight out to the United States. And with the backing of our incredible sales team we have over there who have supported me immensely, We went knocking on customers' doors, big customers, mind you. I would walk into these massive offices of leading global brands in the world and be like, hey, I'm here from Sri Lanka and I want to talk to you about sustainability. I think they were taken back. I could not understand why someone would fly 10,000 miles for this subject. But I think we made an impression because no one had done it before. 8 out of 10 meetings may have been useless at that time. But as months have gone and as some of these customers have boarded on their own journeys, I have received emails inquiring about certain things that were discussed 18 months ago. They remembered EFL. They remembered us as a service provider who came in and asked them, how can we help you? I would go there representing the company, but not to talk about EFL's initiatives. Who cares about what we have done? But to ask them, what can we do for you? Hey, we noticed you do more air than sea freight. Can we offer you some decarbonization solutions? Or hey, we noticed you send us an Excel sheet every quarter asking us for all our emissions for your goods. We noticed that. So we have made a dashboard for you. Here's your login credentials. Just sign in and you can see at any time all the emissions EFL has for your cargo, air freight, ground freight, sea freight. Digitization is key today, being data and analytical driven for efficiency purposes. It enhances security and risk elimination. We spend time researching and understanding customers' focuses, investing in their initiatives to offer green deliveries. We thrive in customizing solutions catered to the clients. Same goes for airlines. Knocked on the doors of headquarters of leading airlines in the Middle East going, hey, talk to me, let's speak sustainability. They may have thought I was crazy at that time, but today we are friends with all these companies. We have good relationships with most of the sustainability representatives. We at EFL value this because, again, we can't go on this journey to net zero by ourselves. Ultimately, we are a logistics company that is very asset light. We don't own the ships, we don't own the planes, and we don't own the trucks. We don't even own the product. So our stakeholders are a key part of us being able to execute this well. We need them. And what I love most about this journey so far is that despite all the challenges and at first people not fully understanding the value, today I am proud to say that the EFL Sustainability Division partakes in sales calls. And that's how important of a subject it has become. We have an outstanding sales team in the USA who drives the biggest chunk of our business. And we work very closely with them on this subject, as they themselves know how important it is to the business. We have grown into becoming an important pillar in the company that helps determine whether we get business or not. And with that, I would like to conclude with this statement. Sustainability equals profit. It's plain and simple. If you want your company to do well, you must prioritize this. From the top management, to the staff in your organization, to the people and groups you surround yourself with, and finally, all your stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sabrina. That was extremely inspiring, spoken from the heart. I'll go straight into the questions because we have very little time and I'd like both EFL and Brandix to answer this. Larger companies like Brandix and EFL have resource advantages in working towards net zero. What advice do you have for smaller companies with limited resources to work towards sustainable and net zero goals and targets? Maybe we can start with Nadia and then Sabrina. Nadia and Vinura, and then maybe Sabrina can add in.
Sure, Savitri. That's a great question. And I think that's something that Victoria brought out a little earlier as well. While we do understand that, not every company has the investment, to get on board this journey immediately, but it's making your company and your organization future ready. So you ensure that over a period of time that you slowly invest in, you do little investments. Maybe you can look at your lighting. How efficient are you becoming in your lighting? Where are your wastages? How energy efficient is your building and your system as it is? And once you identify where those gaps are, then you put in a strategy to decide, what are we doing on a short-term impact level? What are we doing in the medium term? And what are we doing in the longer term? And overall, you set that target to ensure that you reach that net zero target. Maybe it takes you a little longer, but you'll still get there anyway.
Yes, I agree with Nadia. Sustainability, doesn't mean big money going out. For you to even embark this journey and for you to start it, the most basic thing you can do is just understand your business, understand your processes, see what gaps there are. And sometimes it's something so little that you need to do to fill in that gap to make your process more efficient. And if you do that, that's one thing you can do. Another thing is just risk elimination, just again, understanding where you're kind of exposing yourself and then just eliminating that. These are just little things you can do that'll immediately put you on the path to a sustainable journey. You don't need to invest much money in it. And another thing that also that occurred to me, I believe there are organizations that fund companies. You can present a case. I know climate finance is one of them. You can present a case to them, and you've got a valid one if you genuinely want to hop on board this sustainability journey. They will review you as an organization, and they might even fund you. So that's another option. Thanks.
Could I ask this from Nadia and Vinura, either of you or both of you? What is the contribution of circularity to net zero? How does an apparel manufacturer utilize this opportunity?
Well, I would say circularity is a pretty broad field. It's not only in the either waste stream or even the energy field. How it is a very big factor in net zero itself is obviously the fact that, for example, if we take waste, for example, in our case, a lot of our fabric waste, at least the branded ones, are usually incinerated. So that there is a certain amount of emissions involved with this incineration. And if we can reincorporate this back into a supply chain, that incineration portion is completely cut off. And we have a significant reduction in our carbon dioxide emissions, which obviously, again, contributes to net zero. So this is one of the examples. Similarly, circularity, not only on the waste aspect, plays a massive role in net zero, all in all.
Thank you. Again, to both of you, when we talk about sustainability, it's not only about the environment. That seems to be the way your mind goes towards when you say sustainability, immediately into environment. But there is a social factor, there's an economic factor. However, almost every industry talks only about the environmental sustainability rather than balancing that triple bottom line. Any thoughts?
I do understand when we say sustainability, a lot of people think that it's only on the environment. But for us, even at Brandix, when we take our sustainability as a holistic pillar, it's not just about our impact on the environment. We also look at our impact on our communities that surround us. And when we talk about the impact that it has on the environment, we do understand that that has a financial impact as well. I mean, when you take your waste footprint, you have to deal with pollution, you have to deal with compliance. So it also makes business and financial sense to be sustainable. And when we look at an ecological footprint, or think about going into that sustainability space, it's not just about a financial aspect that you're looking at. You're looking at, being sustainable for a business. You're looking at being sustainable for our labor and social perspectives as well. I mean, if you take a green factory that we have, not just a green factory, but any of our factories, green spaces or sustainable spaces create a more improved working environment, and that kind of links in with all of the SDGs as well. We're talking about better work environments for employees. We're talking about social and community development as well, and that entire thing becomes a more holistic picture. Of course, today we focus on a very small aspect of sustainability, which is on carbon emissions and how we can mitigate that fact. But the truth is that sustainability is a very broad topic, and there's a lot of discussion even ongoing whether there's a new field called sustainability science, and whether there's what is really scientific about it. So it's quite a broad term and it encompasses all of it, although some organizations do tend to focus on just the environmental aspects as well.
Sabrina, do you want to quickly wrap up in 100 seconds?
Sustainability is not just environment. That is a really, really false conception. There's so many material topics that fall under sustainability. There's the compliance part, ethical sourcing. There's an HR part to sustainability, which is huge. You know, how you employ people, your processes of doing that. And it's purely not just environment. So for anyone who thought that it's really not, and we can do an entire another session on that.
That's true, actually, another session on that. Right, I'm sorry, but we've completely finished our time. We know that organizations have to take the lead. They're critical in addressing complexities that face the world today, but it is a responsibility and an obligation because there is an inextricably intertwined linking of people, planet, and profit. And let me take a line from Sabrina, actually. There's no point in actually having everything written down and all that. The point is you have to feel it. And that is the only way we are going to make any progress towards a net zero future. And we have seen the examples of how these companies have translated targets to action. Start small, it will become big eventually, but just start small. That is the only way we can make some progress. There will be a link that will be shared with everyone just to get feedback. Please don't forget, you have to, could you just reply to us and let us know how the summit went and what more you would like to know, suggestions on how to improve. And while we thank every one of our speakers and each of you for joining us today, do have a safe day, a safe time, and we'll catch up with you soon. And be green, because we really have no planet B. Thank you.